You think Anne Boleyn's execution was just a clean swing of a sword? Think again. Her death was a slow-motion psychological torment, a royal performance crafted not to kill swiftly, but to annihilate her soul before the blade even touched her neck. She spent 17 sleepless nights in the same tower where she'd once celebrated her coronation, now pacing toward a scaffold so low it robbed her of dignity. Her eyes moved after the strike. Her lips whispered prayers. And Henry? He was already planning his next wedding. This wasn't justice. It was theatrical obliteration. Let's plunge into the twisted truth. Anne Boleyn didn't just walk into the Tower of London. She was dragged back into the same stone halls where 3 years earlier she'd been adored as queen. Imagine it, then she arrived to cheers. Now she arrived in chains. She had once processed through these walls on a barge draped in velvet. Now she stepped through them flanked by guards. Falsely accused of incest, adultery, and treason. And here's the cruel twist. Henry VIII delayed her execution, not out of mercy, but to torture her with uncertainty. It was scheduled, then postponed, then scheduled again and again. Every sunrise might have been her last. Every knock at her cell door could have meant death, or another day of waiting. Prisoners said Anne would laugh randomly, not because she was happy, but because her mind was fracturing. That laugh? It was the sound of a soul trying to claw its way back to control, and above her cell, Henry was celebrating. He was planning his wedding to Jane Seymour before Anne's body was even cold. That's not just betrayal, that's psychological warfare. But if you think this is already unbearable, wait until you hear how they staged her execution. Henry didn't want Anne's head hacked off with the traditional English axe. That would be too ordinary. Instead, he summoned a French executioner from Calais, known for his precision blade work. To the public, this seemed like mercy. One clean stroke instead of 3 brutal blows. But here's the truth. It was theater. Henry was curating Anne's final moments like a stage play. The swordsman wasn't even English. He was unfamiliar, cold, anonymous. Anne wouldn't even see the sword. He hid it behind his back while she waited, blindfolded, kneeling, listening for a sound that would mean oblivion. Why a foreigner? Because this wasn't about a clean kill. It was about humiliation. A queen so disgraced that she couldn't even be executed by her own countrymen. Meanwhile, the crowd was already gathering. Vendors sold snacks. Families brought children. It wasn't justice. It was spectacle. And as the executioner warmed up, yes, practiced, on stray animals the night before, Anne knelt in her cell, writing final prayers to a God who stayed silent. But nothing could prepare her for the moment she'd be led out, through halls lined with those who once bowed to her. Now, they came to watch her die. Executions in Tudor England were usually staged high, elevated platforms meant to separate the condemned from the crowd. Not Anne's. Her scaffold was barely 3 feet tall. Why? Because Henry wanted the people to look her in the eye, to see every twitch, every flinch, every blink before the blade hit. This wasn't elevation. It was exposure. Anne had to kneel just above ground level, close enough to smell the sweat and breath of the crowd, close enough to hear the whispered insults. Whore, witch, traitor. And here's where it gets darker. Many in that crowd were paid to jeer. That's right. The crown planted hecklers to make sure Anne's death would be loud. Even in her last moments, the manipulation didn't stop. Before kneeling, she was expected to give a final speech. Not to defend herself, but to thank the king for his justice. Imagine that. seconds from death. You're required to praise the man who condemned you. Anne did it. She praised Henry as a gentle and sovereign lord. Not because she meant it, but because her daughter Elizabeth, just 2 years old, was still alive. And Anne knew the wrong words could seal her child's fate too. The human brain can only tolerate so much anticipation before it shatters. Anne Boleyn was told her execution would be on May 18th. She prepared, prayed, confessed, readied herself for death. Then it was postponed. No reason. Just, not today. Then it happened again and again. Each time she'd be led to the threshold of death, only to be yanked back. Not for clemency, not for fairness, but to let fear fester. Tower records show she received the sacrament at 2 a.m. that final night. She was awake the entire time. Not from insomnia, because her brain couldn't shut off. Prisoners noted her cheerfulness, but psychologists today would call it dissociation, the calm of a woman who's already separated her body from her soul. And the morning of her execution, she was seen laughing with her ladies, not from joy, but because her mind had nowhere left to go. This wasn't mercy. This was a psychological dismemberment. But if you think this is horrifying, the moment the blade struck, it gets worse. Her body died. Her mind might not have. Anne knelt on the low scaffold, hands folded, blindfold in place. The crowd hushed, but not in reverence. They wanted blood. The swordsman stood behind her, sword hidden. Anne couldn't see him. She only heard footsteps, breathing, the scrape of boots on the wood. Then he shouted, "Bring me the sword!" to distract her while it was already in his hands. And in that moment of confusion, he struck a single blow, clean, swift, perfect, by Tudor standards. But here's the horror. Witnesses reported her lips still moving. Her eyes fluttered. Her mouth opened as if to speak. Science confirms it. Severed heads can remain conscious for up to 30 seconds after decapitation. Anne Boleyn may have known she was dead. She may have tried to speak, to pray, to scream. Her ladies in waiting fainted. Some vomited, others ran. This wasn't a moment of peace. It was a final insult. Death itself twisted into a performance. A queen's mind, trapped in a body no longer there. And even then, Henry didn't bother to attend. He was miles away, waiting for the messenger to confirm it was done. His reply? "Now I am free." You'd think the Queen of England would be given a royal burial. Think again. When Anne's head hit the scaffold, no coffin waited for her. No priest. No funeral rites. Her ladies, devastated, trembling, had to scramble for something. Anything. They found it. An old arrow chest. Not even a proper box. Just a crude wooden crate, the kind used to haul military supplies. Anne's body was stuffed into it like cargo, her severed head placed beside her. No preparation, no washing, no dignity. The burial? A hurried affair in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, inside the Tower grounds. Unmarked, unblessed. She was dumped into a grave beneath the floor, where her remains would be forgotten for centuries. That wasn't negligence. That was design. Henry wanted her erased. This wasn't just about death. It was about deletion. No portrait, no epitaph, just rot. But Anne's destruction wasn't complete yet, because Henry's purge didn't stop at her grave. It tore through her entire legacy, one symbol at a time. You want to know how thorough Henry was? He didn't just bury Anne. He buried everything. Royal portraits, burned, tapestries, removed, stone carvings with her emblem, an ornate falcon, were scraped from the palace walls. Even the tower where she died was stripped of her insignia. It's called damnatio memoriae, damnation of memory, a practice the Romans perfected. Erase someone so completely that it's as if they never lived. Courtiers were forbidden from saying her name. Servants who slipped up were dismissed, or worse, and her daughter Elizabeth declared illegitimate. Stripped of her titles, her household disbanded overnight. One day she was the Princess of England, the next, a royal embarrassment. There are records of Elizabeth, just 2.5 years old, without proper clothes, without nurses, without protection. Because Anne was gone, not just dead, unmade, and if anyone questioned it, they were told, the king has moved on. But Anne's memory had already infected the court. The women who witnessed her death would never forget it. Some couldn't even speak of it. Imagine the moment. Your queen has just been beheaded. Her lips still move. Her eyes still flutter. Now imagine this. You have to clean her up. Anne's ladies-in-waiting were ordered to retrieve the body. No guards helped. No priest guided them. One knelt beside the head. Another reached for the body. They were shaking, weeping. Some whispered prayers. Others simply sobbed. They picked her up, piece by piece, and placed her in the arrow chest. One dropped the lid. Another slammed it shut, as if trying to end the nightmare with wood and nails. Some of these women would never recover. One joined a convent. Another disappeared from court entirely. And still, they said nothing. Because to grieve Anne Boleyn too publicly? That was treason now. Her death wasn't just a punishment. It was a message. If this could happen to her, a crowned queen, imagine what they'd do to you. You imagine a somber gathering, don't you? Dignified silence. Mourning, respect. Not for Anne Boleyn. Tower records and eyewitnesses reveal a different picture, one that reeks of rot and spectacle. Her execution wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated. Vendors sold meat pies and beer. Children sat on shoulders. It was a festival, a warning disguised as entertainment. And the cheering? Not spontaneous, carefully planned. Henry's men planted loudmouths in the crowd, paid shouters instructed to chant curses, hurl insults, and cheer the blade. This was psychological warfare, performed on a national stage. The king didn't need to be present. The humiliation was complete. Even after death, Anne's body was just a prop in a performance. And here's the final twist. She'd once been England's darling, the woman Henry broke with the Catholic Church to marry. The reason the country changed religion. Now, she was just a morning distraction before lunch. Think about that. One day you're queen, the next you're chopped meat, and the butcher walks away richer than you. While Anne's body was still cooling in her makeshift grave, Henry VIII was already dressing for celebration. The very next day he became engaged to Jane Seymour. No mourning period, no solemn reflection, no guilt. He wore white, the color of joy. His court toasted. Minstrels played. The message was clear. Anne was dead. Long live the new womb. Because that's what this was really about. Wombs, sons, succession. Anne had failed to produce a living male heir. Elizabeth was a girl, and to Henry, that made Anne disposable. Her death wasn't a tragedy, it was a reset button. Historians often debate whether Henry truly believed Anne was guilty. The truth? He didn't care. She had become inconvenient, politically awkward, emotionally dangerous. So he hit delete, and within days, he was married again. hoping the next woman would give him the son he craved like a madman chasing immortality. Anne's blood wasn't even dry when her replacement walked the same halls. Elizabeth Tudor was not even 3 when her mother's head hit the scaffold. But the consequences hit her instantly. Henry declared her illegitimate. Her name was erased from succession documents, her royal staff dismissed, her belongings taken. She was moved to a remote household, dressed in plain clothing, and watched constantly. All because her mother had displeased the king. And let's not pretend this was just a formality. It was trauma. Elizabeth, already intelligent and observant, knew she had been cast aside, her mother gone, her future ripped away. One court record noted she cried when her favorite nurse was dismissed. Another described how she clung to a small toy horse, the last thing left from her princess days. This wasn't just a political reshuffling, it was psychological exile. And yet, decades later, Elizabeth would rise. She would wear the crown her mother died for. But as a child, she was a living ghost of Anne Boleyn's disgrace, a toddler made to bear the weight of a beheading. Make no mistake, Anne's death wasn't just about Anne. It was a message to every woman in the Tudor court, every wife, every daughter, every ambitious noblewoman. The message, stay in your place. Anne had dared to rise above her station. She'd gone from lady-in-waiting to queen. She'd spoken her mind, questioned the king, dared to be intelligent, political, and powerful. That made her dangerous. So Henry didn't just kill her. He unmade her. And in doing so, he rewrote the rules of femininity in England. The lesson was clear. Be silent, be fertile, be obedient, or be Anne. Even the executioner, a foreign expert brought in for a single stroke, was part of the spectacle. It was theatrical, symbolic, efficient, and lethal. After Anne, women at court treaded lightly, their eyes lowered, their voices softer, their ambitions cloaked in silence. Anne's decapitation wasn't just physical, it was ideological. The sword fell on her neck, but the scar ran through an entire generation of women. Let's talk about the most vile part of this entire farce. The charges. Anne Boleyn wasn't just accused of adultery. She was accused of incest with her own brother, George Boleyn, Viscount Rochford. That wasn't just slander. That was psychological warfare turned up to 11. The trial was a show. The evidence, fabricated, the witnesses, coerced, the dates of the supposed affairs. Some didn't even line up with Anne's whereabouts. One man she was accused of seducing had been out of the country at the time. Didn't matter. Henry needed guilt. So guilt was manufactured. And the incest charge? That was designed to destroy Anne's entire family line, to make her name synonymous with degeneracy. During the trial, Anne's composure stunned the court. She defended herself eloquently, even mocking the absurdity of the claims. But her fate had already been decided. George was executed days before her, and Anne knew. They made sure she knew. This wasn't justice. It was annihilation disguised as law. And yet, even in the courtroom, she never confessed, never begged. She stood, accused of sleeping with her brother, and still carried herself like a queen. Because deep down, she knew history would outlive the lies. You'd think the court would be somber, mourning, reflecting. But on the night before Anne's beheading, there was a banquet, a literal dance. Musicians played, wine flowed, laughter echoed through the same palace where Anne had once dined as queen. This wasn't just celebration, it was mockery. Henry wanted joy broadcasted, not just indifference to Anne's death, delight. Imagine that. You're pacing a cold stone floor, knowing tomorrow your head will roll, while the people who once bowed to you are drunk on venison and red wine. Even the nobles who once praised her beauty and wit now toasted to her death. Why? Because aligning with Anne was now dangerous. Everyone wanted to show the king they were loyal, that they were over it, that they didn't mourn the queen. So they danced. One ambassador described the mood as unbothered gaiety. Another wrote, "The lady shall lose her head, and none here shed a tear." It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a burial of conscience. And Anne? She heard the music drifting through her cell window as she tried to sleep. When Anne's head rolled, it didn't vanish cleanly. It splashed. Her blood soaked into the wood, into the cloth, into the stone. The scaffold wasn't washed for days. Why? Because they wanted the stain to linger. A visual reminder to every servant, every noble, every visitor. This is what happens. The tower staff avoided that area for weeks. Some claimed the ground smelled of iron and death long after. Anne's ghost was said to walk the corridor near her cell, pale, barefoot, holding her severed head. Even now, visitors report cold spots, sudden dread, the feeling of being watched. But perhaps the most haunting detail. Henry never set foot in the tower after her execution. He'd built the perfect stage for her humiliation, but even he couldn't walk through the rot he'd created. He moved on, married again, changed England forever. But the stones remembered, because the blood of a queen doesn't disappear. It sinks, it stays, it waits. From the moment Anne Boleyn entered court, she was marked. Not for greatness, not for royalty, but for use. She was the spark Henry VIII needed to ignite a reformation, a weapon to strike the Pope, a fertile body he believed would give him a son. And when she failed, when biology and politics didn't cooperate, he turned on her like a man possessed. Her death wasn't an accident of power. It was a blueprint, a carefully staged execution designed to humiliate her, erase her, and terrify every woman who might dream of influence. Let's recap the horror. She was locked in the tower where she had once celebrated her coronation, and kept there in a purgatory of psychological torment. Her execution was delayed repeatedly, on purpose, to unspool her sanity thread by thread. She was denied a proper coffin. Her ladies placed her headless body into a used arrow chest, like refuse. She was beheaded by a foreigner, blindfolded, tricked into calm with false words, then struck from behind while the crowd jeered. Her lips moved after death. Her legacy was dismantled stone by stone, portrait by portrait, until even her name was a forbidden whisper in royal halls. Her own daughter, a toddler, was declared a bastard and stripped of royal protections. And yet, Elizabeth Tudor would one day sit on the throne, ruling longer than any monarch before her, carrying her mother's fire and fury in every decree. But what did it cost? Anne's trial was rigged. Her accusers were bought. The incest charge, pure theater. The adultery, fabricated. The punishment, irrevocable. And perhaps the most chilling part, Henry VIII got away with it. Not only that, he thrived. He remarried, ruled, and reshaped an entire church in his image. He told the world he was right, that Anne had bewitched him, that her death was justice. But the records survive. The witnesses remember. The scaffold still whispers. And we know the truth. Anne Boleyn was not executed. She was obliterated so thoroughly that centuries passed before historians began to dig her memory from the ash. She was a woman who dared to speak in a court of men, who loved fiercely, who failed to produce a male heir and was turned into a national tragedy for it. And still, her daughter changed the world. Still, her name survives. Still, her ghost walks the tower. We began this story with the myth of a quick, clean death, of mercy by sword, of justice served. Now we know better. This wasn't mercy. This was a warning. This was a man rewriting history with a blade. This was a queen turned into a ghost by design. And here's the question we leave you with. What modern injustice is being staged right now, dressed as law, masked as order, while we cheer and look away? Because Anne Boleyn's story isn't just about the past. It's a mirror. And sometimes, the reflection is horrifying. If this story shocked you, good. It should. Because history isn't clean. It's soaked in blood, dressed in silk, and smiling through gritted teeth. Comment below with the part that haunted you the most. Was it the lips moving after death, the incest trial, or the arrow box burial? Subscribe for more dark history they don't teach in school. Like this video if you're glad you weren't born in 1536. And remember, Anne Boleyn lost her head. But we still have ours. Let's use them.